My sister mocked my husband for wearing softer panties. She never understood who he truly is. When my sister mocked my husband for choosing softer underwear, something he needs for comfort, she thought it was harmless teasing. She didn't see the daily challenges he faces, or the quiet courage it takes for him to live authentically. Watching him endure that moment with grace changed me. Instead of reacting with anger, we chose dignity. In time, the truth became clear to everyone. Kindness is strength, and respect matters more than judgment. What she tried to shame became a lesson she never expected. If this story helps you understand that dignity and compassion matter more than conformity, please leave a like and subscribe. There are moments when cruelty disguised as humor reveals not just the character of the person being cruel, but also the depth of understanding and grace in the person being targeted. When watching someone you love face mockery with dignity teaches you more about strength than any confrontation ever could. The afternoon my sister Lauren made a joke about my husband Marcus wearing women's underwear. Discovering this during a visit when she'd helped with laundry and decided it was appropriate material for public commentary was one of those moments. Her attempt at humor was meant to embarrass Marcus, to make him feel ashamed for choosing comfort over conforming to arbitrary gender norms. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't have known because she'd never bothered to see beyond surface judgments, was that Marcus's choice to wear softer underwear wasn't about sexuality or gender identity. It was about managing a chronic medical condition with grace and practicality that required more courage than she'd ever demonstrated in her conventionally comfortable life. My name is Emma Richardson, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married to Marcus for 7 years, together for 9 total. And in that time, I've learned more about real strength and authentic living from my husband than from anyone else in my life. Marcus has a condition called interstitial cystitis, a chronic bladder condition that causes pain, urgency, and extreme sensitivity in the pelvic region. It's an invisible illness that affects every aspect of his daily life, from what he can eat and drink, to what fabrics can touch his skin without causing pain, from how he plans his days around bathroom access, to how he manages the physical and emotional toll of living with chronic discomfort that most people can't see and therefore don't understand or accommodate. One of the many ways Marcus manages his condition is through careful selection of underwear that doesn't aggravate his symptoms. Traditional men's underwear, with rough seams, tight elastic, and fabrics that don't breathe well, causes him significant pain and discomfort. After years of trial and error, Marcus discovered that certain styles of women's underwear, particularly those made from soft modal or bamboo fabrics with minimal seams and gentle elastic, provide the comfort he needs to function without constant pain. It's a practical medical accommodation, no different than someone with sensitive skin choosing specific fabrics or someone with back problems selecting particular chair designs. Marcus was initially uncomfortable about wearing women's underwear, not because there's anything inherently wrong with it, but because he'd internalized societal messages about gender-appropriate clothing and worried about judgment from others if they knew. I'd helped him work through those feelings, had emphasized that managing his medical condition in ways that reduced his pain was far more important than conforming to arbitrary social norms about which underwear styles were for which genders. Over time, Marcus had become comfortable with his choice, had stopped feeling shame about a practical accommodation that significantly improved his quality of life. We'd been private about this aspect of Marcus's condition management, not because we thought it was shameful, but because it was personal medical information that wasn't anyone else's business. Our close friends knew Marcus had interstitial cystitis and that it required various accommodations, but the specific details of his underwear choices weren't relevant to share. We'd assumed that this privacy would be respected by family as well, that personal clothing choices wouldn't become topics of public commentary or judgment. My sister Lauren had always been someone who used humor as social currency, who valued being seen as funny and entertaining even when her jokes came at other people's expense. She had a pattern of making comments about people's appearances, choices, or circumstances that she framed as teasing, but that often crossed lines into actual cruelty. I'd confronted her about this pattern multiple times over the years, asking her to be more thoughtful about how her jokes affected people, but Lauren always defended herself by saying I was too sensitive, that everyone teases and people should learn to take a joke, that her intentions were good even if her delivery sometimes missed the mark. The incident that would force a permanent reckoning with Lauren's pattern of cruel humor happened on a Sunday afternoon when she'd stopped by our house unannounced. Marcus and I had been doing laundry, and Lauren had offered to help fold clothes while we visited. I'd accepted her offer without thinking about what might be in the laundry. It was just a normal domestic task that families help each other with regularly. But while folding, Lauren had discovered Marcus's underwear, had registered that they were women's styles, and had decided this was hilarious material that needed to be shared. "Emma, why are there women's panties in your laundry?" Lauren asked loudly, holding up a pair of Marcus's underwear with an exaggerated expression of confusion. "Are you wearing men's underwear and Marcus is wearing yours? Is this some kind of weird role reversal thing you two have going on?" She was laughing at her own joke, clearly thinking this was funny and appropriate commentary. I felt my face flush with anger and protective instinct. "Those are Marcus's," I said flatly, hoping my tone would signal that this wasn't appropriate territory for jokes. "And they're not really anyone's business but his." I tried to keep my voice neutral, tried not to escalate the situation, but I could see Marcus in the doorway looking mortified and hurt. But Lauren didn't take the hint to drop it. Instead, she doubled down on the joke, her voice getting louder and more performative. "Marcus wears women's panties? Oh my God, that's hilarious. Do you pick them out together? Do you match? Is this a comfort thing, or is there something else going on that I should know about?" She was still laughing, still treating this as comedy material, rather than recognizing she was crossing serious boundaries. Marcus's face had gone pale. He stood in the doorway for a moment, clearly deciding how to respond, whether to explain or to just leave the room and avoid the confrontation. I was about to intervene more forcefully, to tell Lauren she was being cruel and needed to stop immediately, when Marcus spoke with a calmness and dignity that made me proud and angry on his behalf simultaneously. "I have interstitial cystitis," Marcus said quietly but clearly. "It's a chronic bladder condition that causes significant pelvic pain. Traditional men's underwear aggravates my symptoms because of rough seams and tight elastic. I wear softer underwear made from gentle fabrics because it's a medical accommodation that helps me manage my pain. It's not a joke, Lauren. It's a practical solution to a health problem that affects my life every single day." The explanation was more than Lauren deserved, more vulnerability than she'd earned the right to hear. But Marcus delivered it with grace, not defensively or angrily, just factually. He was giving her the information she needed to understand why her joke was inappropriate, giving her the opportunity to recognize her mistake and apologize. Lauren's laughter died, her expression shifting from amused to uncomfortable as she realized she'd crossed a line. But instead of apologizing immediately, instead of acknowledging that she'd made a cruel joke about someone's medical accommodation, Lauren tried to deflect. "I didn't know," she said, her tone defensive. "How was I supposed to know it was for a medical condition? You never told me Marcus had health problems. I was just making a joke. I didn't mean anything by it. You didn't need to know the specific medical details to know that making jokes about someone's underwear is inappropriate," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended, but unable to maintain calm politeness in the face of Lauren's deflection. "You found something personal in our laundry and decided it was appropriate material for public mockery without knowing anything about why Marcus makes the choices he makes. You didn't ask privately if you were genuinely confused. You made a loud joke designed to embarrass him. That's cruel, Lauren, regardless of whether there's a medical reason behind it or not." Lauren looked between Marcus and me, clearly uncomfortable but also defensive about being called out for her behavior. "I said I didn't know," she repeated. "I apologize if Marcus is upset, but you guys are being pretty intense about what was meant to be a harmless joke. People tease each other about stuff all the time. It's not that serious." "It is serious when you're making jokes about someone's medical accommodations," Marcus said, still maintaining that remarkable calm despite the hurt visible in his expression. "It is serious when you take something personal and private and turn it into public entertainment. And it's serious when instead of immediately apologizing when you learn you've hurt someone, you defend your behavior and minimize their feelings by saying it was just harmless teasing." Lauren left shortly after, the visit ending in awkward tension rather than the casual family connection it was supposed to have been. After she left, I found Marcus sitting in our bedroom looking exhausted and hurt, in ways that went beyond just the immediate incident. "I hate that she made me explain," he said quietly. "I hate that I had to disclose personal medical information to justify why I make the choices I make about my own body and my own comfort. And I hate that even after explaining, she couldn't just apologize without defending herself and minimizing how her joke affected me." I sat with Marcus and held him while he processed the violation of privacy and the cruelty of being made into entertainment for someone else's amusement. We talked about how Lauren's pattern of cruel humor had been building for years, how this incident was just the most recent and most personally hurtful example of behavior that had always been problematic, but that family dynamics had normalized and minimized. We talked about boundaries and how we wanted to handle interactions with Lauren going forward, whether we were willing to maintain relationship with someone who couldn't respect our privacy or respond appropriately when she'd caused harm. Later that evening, Lauren sent a text message that was ostensibly an apology, but that was actually more justification and deflection. "I'm sorry that my joke upset you both. I genuinely didn't know about Marcus's medical situation, and if I had known, obviously I wouldn't have said anything. I hope we can move past this and not let one awkward moment damage our relationship. Love you both." The apology was conditional. Sorry that you were upset, not sorry for making the joke. It emphasized her ignorance rather than taking responsibility for making private matters public entertainment. And it framed the incident as one awkward moment, rather than as pattern of behavior that had been building for years. I showed the text to Marcus, and we talked about whether to respond and, if so, what to say. We decided that a clear response setting boundaries was necessary, that allowing Lauren to minimize the incident would just perpetuate the pattern that had led to this situation. I wrote back, "Lauren, your apology emphasizes that you didn't know about Marcus's medical condition, rather than acknowledging that making jokes about someone's underwear is inappropriate, regardless of whether there's a medical reason. You took something private and personal and turned it into public mockery without knowing anything about the circumstances. And when confronted, your first response was to defend your behavior, rather than apologize for causing hurt. This is part of a pattern where you make jokes at other people's expense, and then deflect responsibility when people tell you you've crossed lines. Marcus and I need space from you right now, while we decide what kind of relationship we're willing to have with someone who can't respect our privacy or respond appropriately when she's caused harm." Lauren's response to that message was angry and defensive. She accused me of overreacting, said I was being unfairly harsh about an innocent mistake, claimed I was choosing my husband over my sister over something trivial. The response confirmed that Lauren fundamentally didn't understand or didn't want to understand why her behavior had been unacceptable, that she was more interested in defending herself than in genuine accountability or changed behavior. Marcus and I maintained distance from Lauren for several months after the incident. During that time, we told other family members what had happened, not to create sides or drama, but because we needed people to understand why we were creating space and to ensure Lauren couldn't control the narrative by framing our boundaries as us being oversensitive or unreasonable. The response from family was mixed but ultimately supportive. Our parents acknowledged that Lauren had a pattern of inappropriate humor, expressed disappointment that she'd violated Marcus's privacy so carelessly, and supported our decision to maintain boundaries until Lauren demonstrated genuine understanding and accountability. What emerged through family conversations was broader recognition of Lauren's pattern that multiple people had noticed, but that hadn't been collectively acknowledged or addressed. Other family members shared examples of Lauren making jokes at their expense, of feeling hurt or diminished by her humor, but not knowing how to address it without being accused of being too sensitive. The incident with Marcus became a catalyst for family-wide conversation about boundaries and respect, about the difference between affectionate teasing and actual cruelty, about taking responsibility when humor causes harm rather than defending intentions and minimizing impact. About 6 months after the incident, Lauren reached out requesting a meeting to talk. Marcus and I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop where we could have private conversation without the complications of being in someone's home. Lauren arrived looking nervous and uncomfortable, very different from her usual confident, entertaining persona. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Lauren began. and about what you both said about patterns and boundaries. I talked to my therapist about it. Yes, I started seeing a therapist partly because of this situation, and I've realized some things about myself that are hard to admit. She paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. I use humor to feel important and entertaining, Lauren continued. I learned growing up that being funny got attention and approval, that making people laugh made me valued. But somewhere along the way, I started prioritizing getting laughs over being kind, started making jokes at other people's expense without really thinking about how it affected them. And when people tried to tell me I'd crossed lines, I defended my behavior instead of listening because admitting I'd been cruel would mean confronting that maybe I wasn't as funny or as good a person as I wanted to believe. She looked directly at Marcus. What I said about your underwear was cruel. It was a violation of your privacy. It mocked something you do to manage your health, and my first response when confronted was to defend myself instead of apologizing for hurting you. I was wrong. I'm sorry for making that joke. I'm sorry for not immediately apologizing when you told me why it was hurtful. And I'm sorry for minimizing your feelings in my text message later. You deserved better, and I failed to provide it. The apology was specific, took responsibility without qualification or deflection, acknowledged both the immediate harm and the pattern it was part of. It was the kind of apology that Lauren should have given 6 months earlier, but that she apparently needed time and professional help to be capable of delivering. Marcus and I looked at each other, communicating silently about whether we were ready to accept this and move toward rebuilding relationship with Lauren. Thank you for that apology, Marcus said finally. It means a lot to hear you take actual responsibility and acknowledge specifically what was wrong, rather than just apologizing for my being upset. I accept your apology, but rebuilding trust will take time, and it will require you demonstrating changed behavior, not just saying you understand what you did wrong. Over the following months, Lauren did demonstrate changed behavior. She stopped making jokes at other people's expense, started asking permission before sharing stories about people's lives, showed respect for privacy and boundaries in ways she hadn't before. When she did occasionally make a comment that someone found hurtful, she apologized immediately and genuinely rather than defending herself. The change wasn't perfect or instant, but it was real and sustained, suggesting that her apology had been sincere and that she was committed to being a different kind of person than the one who'd mocked Marcus's underwear choices. Lauren and I gradually rebuilt our relationship, though it's different now than it was before. There's more honesty about boundaries and feelings, more directness when something doesn't work, more acknowledgement that love between family members requires respect and kindness, not just shared history. Marcus and Lauren's relationship also rebuilt slowly, with Marcus setting clear boundaries about what topics were and weren't appropriate for discussion, and Lauren respecting those boundaries consistently. The incident taught our entire family important lessons about cruelty disguised as humor, about privacy and respect, about the courage it takes to live authentically when you have challenges that aren't visible to others. Marcus's grace in the face of Lauren's mockery, his willingness to explain despite not owing her that vulnerability, his insistence on genuine apology rather than deflection. All of that demonstrated strength that made Lauren's attempt at humor look small and mean by comparison. What Lauren tried to shame, Marcus's practical medical accommodation that requires choosing clothing that reduces his pain, became a lesson she never expected. Not because we publicly shamed her back or weaponized her mistake against her, but because her cruelty revealed her own character issues that she ultimately had to confront. The path from her mockery to genuine apology to changed behavior was long and required professional help and difficult self-examination, but it resulted in Lauren becoming someone more capable of kindness and empathy, someone who could understand that respecting people's dignity matters more than getting a laugh. 2 years after the incident, Marcus and I are 36 and still navigating his chronic illness with grace and practical accommodations that prioritize his comfort over conforming to meaningless social norms. He still wears soft underwear that doesn't aggravate his condition, still makes daily choices about managing his health that require courage most people don't have to demonstrate. And he does it all with dignity that commands respect from people who take the time to see beyond surface judgments to understand the person he actually is. Lauren, at 31, has become someone capable of genuine relationships built on respect rather than on humor that comes at others' expense. She volunteers with organizations supporting people with chronic illnesses, has educated herself about invisible disabilities and the accommodations they require, has used her own experience of causing harm and being held accountable as motivation to be more thoughtful and kind. Her growth doesn't erase the harm she caused, but it demonstrates that people can change when they're held accountable and when they're willing to do difficult work of examining their own behavior honestly. My name is Emma Richardson. My sister mocked my husband for wearing women's underwear, thinking it was hilarious material for jokes, until she learned it was practical accommodation for chronic medical condition. He manages every day with grace and courage she'd never had to demonstrate. Watching Marcus endure that mockery with dignity taught me more about strength than any confrontation ever could. Instead of reacting with anger, we chose to set boundaries and require genuine accountability. In time, Lauren learned what we already knew. Kindness is strength. Authentic living requires courage, and respect matters far more than conforming to arbitrary social norms or getting a laugh at someone else's expense. What she tried to shame became a lesson in grace that changed her more than it changed us. Thank you for reading. If this story helped you see that dignity and compassion matter more than conformity, please like and subscribe.